What if everything that's ever happened, every thought, every breath, every falling leaf, was inevitable? Not by fate, but by physics. This is the haunting promise of Laplace's demon, a mind that could, in theory, know everything, past, present and future, all at once. You're listening to Insomnia Hacker, because your mind won't shut off. So we let it wander. Wherever you are, whatever the hour, this is your time to drift, to loosen the grip of thought, to release the weight of the day, to float quietly into the currents of deeper reflection. Tonight, we begin with a question, one that is both ancient and endless. What if the entire universe were a perfect machine? Not just the stars and their courses, not just the slow turn of seasons, but every drop of rain, every flicker of thought, every word you've ever spoken. What if it was all the unfolding of one great equation, one silent mechanism set into motion long ago, still ticking now? We're not here to solve that mystery, only to explore its shape, its history, its gentle implications. You might imagine yourself drifting high above the earth. Cities flicker beneath you like circuitry. Clouds coil and unravel in patterns older than language. And everything, every movement, every cause, every consequence, flows with the inevitability of clockwork. This is the realm of Laplace's demon, a thought experiment from the Enlightenment, born in quiet halls of reason and precision. A mind that could, in theory, know all things, if only the data were perfect and the laws unchanging. Tonight, we trace this clockwork dream through centuries of philosophy and physics, through polished brass orreries and cold observatories, through silicon circuits and simulated minds. There's no need to hold on tightly. Let the thoughts come and go. We're only here to drift. You might imagine yourself adrift in space, far above the turning Earth. Below, cities flicker like circuitry. Clouds swirl in patterns older than language. And everything, every motion, every cause, every consequence, flows with the inevitability of clockwork. This is the domain of Laplace's demon, a thought experiment born in the quiet halls of Enlightenment science, a mind that could, in theory, know all things, if the data were perfect and the laws unchanging. We will trace this dream, the clockwork dream, through centuries of philosophy and physics, through orreries and observatories, through silicon chips and neural networks. It is a journey not of facts alone, but of feelings, the comfort and the unease that comes with imagining a universe already written. And yet, as you settle deeper into your pillow, as the world beyond your eyes softens into haze, let go of any need to understand everything. Let the ideas come and go like tides. There is no need to grasp, only to float. Let us begin. Imagine, if you will, a mind, not a person, not a god, not a creature of flesh and need, but a purely rational intellect. This mind is vast, boundless. Its senses are not confined to eyes and ears, but stretch instead across every corner of existence. It knows, with perfect precision, the position and momentum of every particle in the universe, every grain of dust, every atom in the air, every flicker of motion in every corner of space. From this knowledge, nothing is hidden. This is Laplace's demon, a thought experiment proposed by the French mathematician Pierre-Simon Laplace in the early 19th century. Not to suggest that such a being exists, but to explore what the laws of physics might imply if they were perfectly deterministic. Laplace imagined that if this intellect could see the universe as it is, fully, exactly, then it could predict everything that would ever happen. Not just tomorrow's weather, but the flight of every bird, the growth of every tree, the course of every life. The future in this vision is not a mystery. It is simply an extension of the present, and so is the past. This mind would not only know what is to come, but all that has already occurred, with the same unwavering clarity. No room for chance, no space for surprise. The idea rests on classical mechanics, the belief, prevalent in Laplace's time, that the universe operates according to strict, unbreakable rules, that from the tiniest collision of atoms to the motion of entire galaxies, everything obeys the same principles. It is a seductive notion, a universe as a vast interlocking puzzle, each piece moving in harmony with the next. And yet, the demon is not malicious. It is not watching us in judgment. It simply knows. There's something strangely calming about that. The idea that beneath all the chaos, there might be order. That even the most tangled stories are, in some deeper sense, unfolding just as they must. You don't need to believe in the demon. It is only a mirror, held up to the assumptions of its age. And as we'll see, the world it reflects is both precise and profoundly strange. Let us drift a little deeper now, into the origins of this clockwork vision. Long before Laplace, long before physics, long before words like determinism or causality ever took shape, human beings looked up at the sky and saw patterns. The rising of the sun, the phases of the moon, the seasons returning with soft persistence. There was a rhythm to the world, not chaotic, but steady. And so, the earliest thinkers, long before laboratories or telescopes, began to wonder if all of life might follow such patterns. If perhaps beneath the swirl of change, there was something constant, something dependable. In ancient Greece, the pre-Socratic philosophers offered some of the first known attempts to describe this order. Anaximander spoke of a balance, what he called to a pyrrhon, the infinite or boundless, from which all things emerge and to which they return. Heraclitus, observing the ever-present flow of the world, famously wrote, "You cannot step into the same river twice." And yet, even in that flow, he saw a hidden law, a logos, a guiding principle that gives shape to the change. To them, the world was not random. It was a kind of music, a melody played on unseen strings. Across the world, in the East, similar visions emerged, not identical, but harmonizing in their own ways. In the Taoist traditions of ancient China, the universe is seen as an unfolding of the Tao, the way, not a rule, not a command, but a path of natural alignment. There is no supreme being orchestrating events, but rather a flow, like water, soft, yielding, yet inevitable. Harmony arises not from control, but from moving in accord with the rhythms of nature. And in the Upanishadic writings of ancient India, the self, Atman, is seen as inseparable from the world soul, Brahman. Reality is a great unfolding, not fragmented, but whole. The cycles of rebirth, the weaving of karma, all suggest a deep interconnection, where cause and effect are not rigid laws, but subtle threads in a grand tapestry. All these traditions, in their own quiet ways, hint at a world that is more than merely chaotic. A world where things happen because, not just at random, but as part of a wider balance. Not the mechanical determinism of Laplace's demon, but something more organic, more fluid, and often more mysterious. As you breathe, you might imagine the pulse of the earth itself, the rise and fall of tides, the migration of stars across a velvet sky, the blooming and withering of plants in a silent garden. all following some deep rhythm. And perhaps this is where the dream of a clockwork universe truly began. Not in steel gears or scientific formulas, but in the quiet recognition that everything moves together. Let's continue now and see how this ancient harmony began to take on more structured mechanical forms. In the ancient world, order was sensed, intuited, glimpsed in the stars, the seasons, the cycles of birth and decay. But over time, this poetic intuition began to take on a sharper form. In the quiet laboratories and candlelit studies of early modern Europe, a transformation began, one that would reshape not only how we viewed the universe, but how we measured it. Imagine a world where mystery still hung thick in the air, where comets were omens, not celestial ice, where sickness came from imbalance, and thunder might yet be the voice of a god. And now imagine that world slowly giving way to something clearer, colder perhaps, but clearer. It is the 16th century, and in Italy, a man named Galileo Galilei turns his eyes to the heavens, not with awe alone, but with a telescope. He watches the moons of Jupiter dance, not in chaos, but in orbits, predictable, repeated. Galileo does not seek myths. He seeks measurement. He begins to formulate a vision of motion grounded in mathematics. Objects fall not because of unseen spirits, but because of describable forces. The angle, the time, the acceleration. These can all be measured. And that is where the shift begins, from story to system, from myth to model. Soon after, René Descartes imagines the entire universe as a kind of machine, matter in motion, obeying strict rules. He pictures the body as a mechanism, the mind as something apart, but even the soul, perhaps, as something that can be analyzed through reason. In Descartes' vision, everything is cause and effect. Every motion is explained by a prior one, and behind it all, a divine watchmaker setting the machine into motion. And then, Isaac Newton. In the late 17th century, he publishes his Principia Mathematica, and the universe changes again, with 3 deceptively simple laws and a theory of gravity. Newton shows that the same force pulling an apple to the ground is also guiding the moon across the sky. He proves what had only been dreamed of before, that the universe is knowable, that its workings can be written in the language of mathematics. In Newton's hands, the cosmos becomes a great celestial clock, not metaphorically, but quite literally. Every orbit, every force, every motion, predictable, precise. And suddenly, the vision of Laplace's demon no longer seems so far-fetched, for if the laws are known, and the present is measured, the future can be foretold. This was the birth of the mechanical universe, elegant, rational, comforting even. The stars no longer whispered secrets, they obeyed equations. The world was, it seemed, a book, written in numbers, waiting to be read. And yet, even in this growing clarity, questions remained. For if everything is determined, then where do we fit in? Let's move gently forward now, toward the place where these mechanical dreams meet the flickering unpredictability of human thought. Let us pause now and place ourselves in the quiet heart of the 18th century. The Enlightenment is in full bloom. Europe is aglow with a new confidence in reason. Across its salons and academies, thinkers are charting the heavens, cataloguing the species, drafting bold treatises on liberty, society, and the nature of truth itself. This is the age of certainty, of symmetry and structure, of light dispelling shadow. And in the midst of it all, a quiet, calculating mind is at work. Pierre Simon Laplace, Born in 1749 in Normandy, Laplace rose not through inheritance or power, but through intellect. The son of a small farmer, he made his way into the world of mathematics and science with calm determination, earning the respect of his peers not through charisma, but through clarity. Laplace had a gift, not for sweeping philosophies or grand gestures, but for making sense of motion, of forces, of probability. He saw the world not in myths or metaphors, but in causes and consequences. His work refined Newton's legacy. When Newton had drawn the outlines of celestial motion, Laplace filled them in with exquisite detail. He studied the solar system, not as a set of orbits alone, but as a vast, interactive machine, each body influencing the others through subtle pulls, governed by unbreakable laws. It was Laplace who helped formulate the idea that nature, in all its complexity, could be reduced to mathematics, not as a simplification, but as a revelation, a truth beneath appearances. And so, in a brief and elegant passage, he imagined the mind that we now call Laplace's demon. He described a being who, knowing all the positions and velocities of every atom in the universe at one instant, could, by applying the laws of physics, predict the entire past and future. No mystery, no randomness, just unfolding. In this vision, the universe is like a grand equation. Given the right information, there is nothing it cannot yield. This idea did not disturb Laplace. Quite the opposite. To him, it was a triumph, a confirmation that the Enlightenment stream of reason was not hollow, that everything, from the spinning of galaxies to the workings of the human brain, obeyed the same natural laws. In fact, when Napoleon once asked him why he had not mentioned God in his scientific writings, Laplace replied, gently and without fanfare, "I had no need of that hypothesis. It was not an act of arrogance. It was simply his faith in the power of knowledge." To Laplace, understanding the universe meant unlocking its laws, and once those laws were known, the rest would follow. Imagine the comfort in such a vision. A cosmos where nothing happens by chance, where everything can, in principle, be known, not by intuition, but by calculation. And yet, beneath this calm, a question lingers. In a universe so tightly wound, where is the room for freedom? But that question, like so many others, we will let rest for now. For Laplace, the demon was not a warning. It was a window into the elegance of reality, a dream of clarity, a dream of knowing. And so we drift on to the age when this dream began to be questioned, not by philosophers, but by physicists who discovered that reality may be far less certain than it seems. The dream of Laplace's demon is elegant, a universe in which every effect has a cause, every future a precise continuation of the present. It is a vision of serenity, of certainty, a world made legible through mathematics. But even the most intricate machines can develop cracks, not always from outside forces, but from the very complexity of their own design. At the dawn of the 20th century, another French thinker, Henri Poincaré, began to study the subtle movements of heavenly bodies, much as Laplace once had. But what he discovered was something altogether different. Poincaré was a mathematician of rare insight, and as he examined the seemingly simple question of how planets influence each other's motion over time, he uncovered something quietly unsettling. Yes, the system was governed by deterministic laws. There was no randomness, no interference, no chaos in the everyday sense. And yet, the outcomes were not always predictable. Tiny changes in initial conditions, so small they could hardly be measured, could lead, over time, to enormous differences in result. A minute variation in position, a fraction of a fraction in velocity, and the system would veer off into wildly different paths. This sensitivity, this delicate instability, came to be known as the beginning of chaos theory. It is not disorder, not the absence of cause and effect. It is something more elusive, a reminder that even in a world ruled by laws, prediction has limits. Imagine a leaf on a quiet stream. You nudge it with your fingertip. It floats, turns, glides forward. Now imagine nudging it again, just slightly differently. A breath to the left, a fraction more pressure. Hours later, it drifts to an entirely different shore. The system obeys the same rules, and yet it escapes your grasp. Poincaré's discovery did not destroy Laplace's demon, but it made its power fragile. For while the laws remain perfect and unchanged, our knowledge of the present is never perfect. Our measurements are never exact, and so the future, though determined in principle, becomes unpredictable in practice. This is not a flaw. It is a feature of complexity. The demon, you might say, still dreams, but it dreams in whispers and cannot speak with confidence. There is something softly disquieting in this, the idea that even a universe without chance can still be unknowable, that the machinery we imagined as smooth and regular may in fact be riddled with folds and ripples just beneath the surface, and yet even this has a kind of beauty. Not the beauty of a flawless clock, but the beauty of a forest, a coastline, a cloud, irregular, but still patterned, still bound by law. Let us rest with that thought, that unpredictability need not mean chaos, that even in the presence of cracks, the mechanism still turns. And as we move forward, we'll step deeper into the 20th century, when another challenge emerges, not just to prediction, but to the very nature of reality itself. So much of human history has been a reaching for answers, for knowledge, for control, to chart the stars, to measure the tides, to predict the weather, to understand the mind, to know so that we might feel safe. Laplace's demon is born of this impulse, a vision of absolute knowledge, absolute certainty, the comforting idea that nothing lies beyond the reach of a perfect intellect. But what if comfort doesn't live there? What if instead it lives in the letting go, in the quiet acceptance that some things will never be predicted, that some truths will always blur at the edges? In the 20th century, the dream of total knowing began to dissolve. Quantum mechanics, born not of philosophy, but of observation, showed us that on the smaller scales, nature is not only uncertain, but fundamentally so. Particles behave not like tiny billiard balls, but like waves of possibility. The more precisely we know where something is, the less we can know how fast it's moving, and vice versa. This is not a flaw in our instruments. It is a feature of reality. The more we look, the more we find that certainty slips through our grasp. It is not that there are no laws. There are, but they do not always tell us what will happen, only what might. And so, slowly, quietly, we begin to ask a different question. What if we don't need to know everything? What if the need to control, to predict, to fix every outcome is not a necessity, but a habit? Perhaps there is another kind of comfort, the comfort of trust. Trust in the rhythm of the world, even when it cannot be mapped. Trust in our ability to navigate without knowing every turn. Like sailing by starlight, not GPS. Like breathing without checking the air. There is something deeply human in uncertainty. It allows room for curiosity, for humility, for awe. And as you lie there, wrapped in stillness, you might feel this shift inside you, from tension to release, from grasping to resting. Not everything must be known. Not every answer must be held in the mind. There is peace in not knowing, not because we give up, but because we surrender gently to the vastness of what is. The universe does not owe us clarity, and yet, in its quiet unfolding, it offers something even deeper, a place to drift, a place to wonder, a place to sleep. Let us float now into the closing thoughts of our journey, where the mechanical meets the mysterious and the future unfolds softly, one moment at a time. It is the part of the mind that dreams of complete knowledge, that wonders if the world could be made perfectly legible, that aches to be certain, but perhaps, like all dreams, it is meant to fade, as the stars fade into morning, as thoughts fade into sleep. There is nothing wrong with seeking answers, but there is peace too in laying down that search, at least for a while. Here, in the hush between breaths, in the gentle rhythm of the present, you can let the questions rest. The world will turn, the winds will move, the clock will tick, whether or not you watch its hands. So breathe. Feel the weight leave your shoulders. Let your body sink gently into stillness. You are part of this great unfolding, this clockwork, this chaos, this wonder. You do not need to control it. You do not need to solve it. You only need to drift with it. And as your mind softens into sleep, remember, there is beauty in knowing, and there is beauty in not knowing. Both are part of the same dream. Good night. The world will turn, the winds will move, the clock will tick, whether or not you watch its hands. So breathe. Feel the weight leave your shoulders. Let your body sink gently into stillness. You are part of this great unfolding, this clockwork, this chaos, this wonder. You do not need to control it. You do not need to solve it. You only need to drift with it. And as your mind softens into sleep, remember, there is beauty in knowing, and there is beauty in not knowing. Both are part of the same dream. Good night.